Joining us now is a man who knows the president well, Sean Spicer, the former White House press secretary, Newsmax host, and author of the new book, Leading America. Sean, welcome, and let me start by saying I'm very happy. The president's condition is improving, but the media have been absolutely pounding him, as you know, for saying don't be afraid of the virus, don't let it dominate your life. It's disappearing, he said yesterday, given the fact that we have lost 214,000 Americans.
Well, they've been pounding him since day one, so this is nothing new. I think it's just the topic has changed. He has been under assault from the media since the day he stepped into the White House, and I don't think it's going to end until the day he leaves the White House, and probably not till then after. But this is nothing. So this is nothing new. I think it's just the topic changes. We're obviously closer to the election and it counts, but the president's going to be back out there making his case to the American people and hopefully focusing on those lines that he said at the debate: 47 months of accomplishments versus 47 years of doing nothing in Joe Biden's case.
Right. Well, he's got 3 rallies scheduled in the next 3 days, so he really wants to get out there. If you were still the press secretary and you were asked, when was the last time the president tested negative for COVID, as journalists try to assess, was he or is he still a danger to others, could you get away with saying, sorry, that's private medical information?
All right, friends. John speaking time to turn it up. Trump's medical report sparked instant chaos. Supporters hailed it as proof of fitness. Critics dissected every word for hidden signs, and cable news turned it into a political firestorm. With this president, nothing is routine. Every update becomes a battle over narrative, perception, and power. New reporting emerged showing the White House had released results of the president's medical checkup that week. The details painted a picture of perfect health, but there were some notable observations buried in the document. The report noted swelling in his lower legs and bruises on his hands, which the White House physician attributed to frequent handshaking.
If I was still the press secretary, I would have lost all my hair by now, and I think I'd look a lot older. Look, I think that the more the transparent they can be, the better. Obviously, there is a sort of a balance. You discussed this earlier in the show with trying to be transparent and understanding that he does have some degree of privacy as a citizen under HIPAA. So the more they can give, the better. And if they could just say, here's when he was tested, it was negative, it would sort of take the talking point away. Because here's what's happening, Howie. When you're not talking about the issues in the economy, what he's been able to do for the military and veterans, then they'll just talk about COVID and testing and things like that. So the more you can take those things off the table, it allows the focus to get back on his policies and his accomplishments.
The president, as you know, has attacked Steve Scully of C-SPAN, who was to be the moderator of the second debate, calling him an ever-Trumper. This morning on Fox, he called him a fraud. This after there was a message posted that Scully had supposedly sent to Anthony Scaramucci, a fierce critic, asking for his advice. You looked into this. Tell us briefly what you found.
Now, that might seem like a minor detail, but in the hypercharged atmosphere of Trump coverage, even bruises become evidence. Even minor swelling becomes a talking point. Everything gets scrutinized, everything gets weaponized, and that's exactly what happened here. The president's physician put out a formal medical summary, and the language in it was unusually clear and direct. Trump was described as fully fit and in excellent cognitive and physical health. That's the official finding. That's what the doctor said. And then follow-up reporting indicated that Trump had also gone to Walter Reed, the military's premier medical facility, for a more comprehensive round of testing. This wasn't a quick checkup. This was a full workup, a CT scan, heart imaging, various preventive assessments designed to catch any potential issues early.
I talked to Steve. He says that he didn't do it. He doesn't. The only times he's ever talked to Anthony Scaramucci were on 2 separate C-SPAN interviews. I've known Steve a long time. He's a good, upstanding man. He's a pro. And frankly, the way he conducts himself on C-SPAN, if you're looking for someone who's going to be a straight, good moderator that focuses on the candidates and not themselves, I think Steve would be a great person to do that.
Yeah, FBI is looking into Scully's explanation that his account was hacked. I know he was once a student intern for Joe Biden, but, you know, he has a solid record of fairness over decades now at C-SPAN. Look, I mentioned this earlier, that the president telling Maria Bartiromo in an earlier interview that unless Attorney General Bill Barr indicts these people, he mentioned Obama and Biden by name, he will go down in history as a very sad situation. Those are the president's words. He also wants Mike Pompeo to release Hillary Clinton's emails. That's come back. That should give you a deja vu from 2016. The journalist's reaction is, if this was the other way, remember when Bill Clinton met with Attorney General Loretta Lynch, your side went nuts, and rightly so. Why? How do you justify him openly calling for indictments of his predecessors?
And the results coming back from that workup were, according to the reporting, entirely consistent with the White House physician summary. Excellent health, fit for duty, no concerns. That's the story as it stands, based on verified reporting from multiple outlets. Now, that should be the end of the conversation. The president got checked, the results were positive, move on. But of course, it isn't the end because this is Trump. And health questions around Trump are never simple. They're never just medical. They're always political. The moment any information about his health enters the public sphere, both sides weaponize it immediately. It's genuinely wild how predictable this pattern has become. It's like clockwork. Every time a health update comes out, the same cycle repeats.
I'll go back to what I said a moment ago, Howie. Look, this president, I think, has a strong record of accomplishments. His policies are moving the country forward. I've written an entire book on that. I think he should stick to his policies. He's got a lot to be proud of what he's done. This justice that he's appointed, Amy Coney Barrett, would be his third Supreme Court justice. As a conservative, these are things that we've yearned for decades. The president should focus on the accomplishments that he's made, the policies that have gotten us here, and what he'll do in a second term. I get he may want to do that. I don't know the legality of it. I don't know the evidence or what exists. But at the end of the day, no one out there in America is going to that isn't already voting for him is going to vote for him because additional emails come out or not, right? What they will vote for him on is whether or not his policies will grow the economy, eradicate the coronavirus, build up our military, take care of our veterans. That's what he should focus on. Stay focused on the policies, stay focused on the accomplishment, in contrast to those 47 years that Biden's been in Washington. But no one additionally is going to vote for you over emails.
So just briefly, Sean, I mean, you work for him. Obviously, a more disciplined approach would make sense to talk about what he has done, what he'll do in his second term. So why does he keep going back to Obama, Biden, Hillary? Why does he do it?
Supporters celebrate, critics scrutinize, social media explodes. And the actual medical facts get buried under an avalanche of interpretation and speculation. Then there's the Fox News angle, because any Trump story that involves Fox automatically gets louder, messier, and more chaotic. There was significant online chatter about Fox News hosts, about who was saying what, about internal shakeups, about whether someone was being punished for covering the story in a way that didn't align with the network's preferred narrative. The rumors got big fast, which is exactly what rumors do when they attach themselves to two of the most polarizing brands in American media, Trump and Fox, at the same time. It's a perfect storm of misinformation potential. But here's what the verified record actually shows about Fox's relevant history on these kinds of things.
I think to some degree there's a level of unfairness there. He looks at some of the activities that they engaged in and that they got away with. And I think, and he goes, well, wait a second, had a Mueller report, I've been impeached, and these people are not held accountable for what they've done. I think there is a level of unfairness, especially when it comes to how the media looks into this or not. I mean, you're watching Joe Biden get away with not being able to answer basic questions. And there is a level of unfairness. I understand that. It's not fair. But at the end of the day, like I said, people aren't going to vote for you because of that. They're going to vote for you because of what you've accomplished and done for the country.
Okay. I mentioned Biden, obviously, in the context of the last administration. So about a half a minute here, you write in Leading America that the legacy media has a view that guests who come on Fox are compromising their credibility. But you say, sitting alongside the likes of extreme leftists like MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, or Joy Reid is just fine. Explain.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that somehow they look at the things that Joy Reid or Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow or numerous other them say, and yet there's no accountability. If a journalist goes on there, that makes total sense. If they go on Fox or come on my show on Newsmax, somehow they're tainted. This is ridiculous. Like, it just shows you.
And it's important because the rumor version of this story and the factual version of this story are pretty different. We're going to walk through both, because understanding the gap between those two things is the whole point of this discussion. Because when you can see how a story gets distorted, how real events get twisted into something they're not, You become much harder to fool the next time it happens. And that's the goal here. Before we get into the deep dive, I want to say something about why this specific kind of story, a presidential health story, is always going to generate maximum heat. It's not just about medicine. It never is. When people talk about a president's health, they're really talking about fitness for power. They're talking about who should be making decisions that affect hundreds of millions of people and entire global systems. And when that president is Donald Trump, someone who has more devoted supporters and more passionate opponents than almost any political figure in modern American history, the conversation about fitness for power is never going to be calm or neutral. It's going to be a battlefield every single time. His supporters need him to be strong. Their entire political identity is tied to the idea of Trump as a fighter, someone who takes on the establishment and wins against all odds. Any suggestion of weakness or decline is a direct threat to that narrative. It undermines everything they've invested in him, and his opponents need him to be deteriorating because if he's sharp and fit and operating at full capacity, it makes it much harder to argue that the voters made a terrible mistake. If he's healthy, if he's capable, then maybe the voters weren't wrong. Maybe their concerns about his fitness were misplaced. And that's a conclusion that many people on the left simply cannot accept. So both sides have enormous stakes in how this story lands. And that's why a medical report, a piece of paper with test results on it, becomes a political event. Because in Trump's America, everything is political. Everything. And I mean absolutely everything. The weather is political, sports are political, and certainly the health of the president is as political as anything gets. Let's actually break this down properly, because there are a few different threads running through this story, and I don't want to just mash them all together. We've got the medical report itself, we've got the Walter Reed follow-up, we've got the public reaction, and we've got the Fox rumors. Those are four separate things, and each one deserves its own treatment. Starting with the medical report, Trump's physician issued the kind of summary that presidential doctors always issue. Formal language, professional framing. And in this case, the findings were unequivocally positive, fully fit, excellent cognitive and physical health. Those are the words that came out of that report. Those are the documented findings. Now here's where the skeptics immediately push back. And look, I get it. Presidential medical reports have a history of being, let's say, optimistic. There is a long tradition in American politics of White House doctors being somewhat selective in how they present a president's health information. Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's, which was officially acknowledged only after he left office, is the most famous example of a condition that wasn't fully disclosed during his presidency. And people raise that history for a reason. The argument is, how do we know the report is giving us the full picture? How do we know what's being left out? That's a fair question to ask in principle. It's a question worth raising. But, and this is a key distinction, raising a fair question is different from asserting an answer to that question that you don't actually have evidence for. Skepticism is healthy. Fabricating a counter-narrative because you're suspicious is something else entirely. And that line gets crossed a lot in how Trump's health gets covered and discussed online. We've seen this happen over and over. A report comes out saying he's healthy. Skeptics immediately claim it's a cover-up. But when asked for evidence, they point to the fact that it's a presidential medical report. And those have been wrong before. That's not evidence of a cover-up. That's historical precedent for skepticism. There's a difference, and that difference matters. The Walter Reed follow-up is actually significant, and it deserves more attention than it got in the original news cycle, because Walter Reed isn't just any hospital. It is the military's flagship medical center. It's where presidents go for serious medical evaluations. It's where the most comprehensive testing is done. And the fact that Trump went there for a CT scan, heart imaging, and additional preventive assessments, that's a comprehensive picture. That's not a photo op checkup. That's a real medical workup of the kind that gives you actual data about cardiovascular health, organ function, and broader systemic indicators. The reporting on that visit was consistent with the White House physician summary. The results supported the excellent health conclusion. Now, did we get every single data point from that visit? No. Presidential medical privacy is still a thing. Not every test result gets released to the public. But what was released and what was reported pointed in the same direction. And at some point, you have to decide whether you're going to engage with the evidence that exists or whether you're going to insist on a counter-narrative that the evidence doesn't support. That's a choice. And a lot of people made a very particular choice about how to cover this story. Let's also put the Walter Reed visit in historical context, because I think that context matters. Presidents have gone to Walter Reed for medical evaluations throughout modern American history. It's a standard part of how the government takes care of the commander-in-chief. And the types of tests Trump reportedly underwent, CT scan, heart imaging, preventive screenings, are the kinds of tests that any physician would recommend for a patient in their late 70s with a demanding lifestyle and a high-stress job. They're not exotic, they're not alarming in themselves, they're the baseline of responsible preventive medicine for someone in that age range. Getting them done at Walter Reed, where the equipment is top tier and the medical staff are among the best in the country, is exactly what you want a president to do. So the fact that Trump got these tests is actually a point in favor of transparency, not a reason for suspicion. The tests were done, the results were reported, the findings were positive. That's the story. Framing the thorough testing as somehow suspicious, as if going to get your heart checked is evidence of a hidden problem, is a backwards way of reading this. If he didn't get tested, people would say he's hiding something. He got tested, and people say the testing itself proves something is wrong. That's not analysis. That's just looking for a reason to be suspicious, regardless of what the facts say. Let's talk about the age and fitness debate more broadly, because that's the real fuel underneath all of this. Trump is in his late 70s as he serves in his second term. That puts him in historically unprecedented territory for a sitting American president in terms of age. The question of whether any person in their late 70s can handle the physical and cognitive demands of the presidency is a legitimate question. Not because Trump specifically is showing signs of impairment that are documented and verified, but because it's a question that should apply to any leader at that age. The job is brutal. The schedule is relentless. The decision-making pressure is constant and often instantaneous. The country has every right to want transparency about the health of the person making those decisions. That's not an attack. That's basic accountability. And Trump supporters would agree with that standard in theory, even if they resist the application of it to their guy specifically. That's how it always goes. But the standard itself is right. And it's worth holding on to even when the politics make it uncomfortable. If you think the public shouldn't know about the health of a sitting president, you're arguing for a level of secrecy that undermines democratic accountability. And that's not a position that's defensible from any consistent democratic perspective. Now let's get to the Fox angle, because this is where the story gets murkier and where you really have to be careful about what's verified versus what's circulating as rumor. The online chatter about Fox suggested that there had been some kind of internal shakeup connected to coverage of Trump's medical report. The rumor was that a host or contributor had been pushed out or disciplined for covering the story in a way that didn't align with the network's preferred narrative. That's the rumor that was flying around, and it got a lot of traction because it fit a familiar story. Fox is a tightly controlled propaganda outlet, where anyone who steps out of line gets punished. That narrative exists for a reason. Fox has a documented history of aligning its coverage very closely with Trump's political interests. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a pattern that has been observed, documented, and commented on, even by people within the network. So the rumor landed on fertile ground. People believed it, or at least repeated it, because it fits something they already understood about how Fox operates. And that is exactly why this kind of rumor spreads so fast and so far. Because it doesn't feel like a rumor. It feels like something that could easily be true. But feeling like it could be true and actually being true are two completely different things. And the verified record on Fox firings tells a more complicated story than the rumor suggests. The biggest relevant firing in Fox's recent history in terms of scale and impact was Tucker Carlson. He was the network's highest-rated host for years, and he was let go in 2023. But the documented reason for that firing, the one that has actually been reported and substantiated, was connected to the Dominion Voting Systems lawsuit. The fallout from that case, which cost Fox close to $800 million in a settlement, created enormous internal pressure. Carlson's departure happened in the wake of that. Not because of anything connected to Trump's medical report or health coverage. That's the factual record. And the reason it matters is because when you attach a false reason to a real firing, you corrupt the story. You create a version of events that people believe and repeat. But that isn't true. And that then gets mixed in with the real, documented, legitimate criticisms of Fox's editorial practices. The whole thing becomes harder to sort out. This is wild how quickly bad information takes root when it gets attached to something real. It's like a weed that grows in the cracks of a sidewalk. Once it's there, it's really hard to pull out. There's also the Fox contributor angle that came out around this same period. A contributor went on air specifically to defend Trump's stamina and health in the wake of the renewed public discussion, which tells you something about how Fox is positioning itself on this story. The network is not running away from the Trump health narrative. It is leaning into the defense of it, which is consistent with Fox's overall editorial posture during Trump's second term. And that's worth noting, not as a conspiracy, but as a business and editorial choice that a major network is making openly. Fox knows its audience. This audience is heavily Trump-aligned. And covering Trump's health in a way that reinforces the excellent fitness narrative is a choice that serves that audience. That's not journalism at its best, but it is transparently what it is. Being able to see it clearly for what it is important. Because if you can't recognize the difference between journalism and audience service, you're going to get confused about what you're watching. Now, there were definitely elements of the Fox coverage that were favorable to Trump. That's not in dispute. The question is whether anyone was actually fired for deviating from that favorable coverage. And the answer, based on the verified record, is no. The rumor of a firing connected to the medical report specifically is not supported by documented evidence. That doesn't mean Fox is a paragon of journalistic integrity. It doesn't mean Fox doesn't have serious problems with its editorial practices. It just means this specific claim is not backed up by the evidence. And that distinction matters. Let's also talk about what the president's team was doing during all of this. They were monitoring the coverage closely. They were pushing back on any suggestion that the medical report was incomplete or misleading. They were working to control the narrative as much as possible. And they were using the friendly coverage on Fox to reinforce their message that the president is healthy and fit for duty. That's standard political operations. Every administration does this. But when it's Trump, everything gets magnified. Everything becomes a story. Everything becomes evidence of something sinister. The reason we care about a president's health isn't political theater, or at least it shouldn't be. The reason it matters is because the 25th Amendment exists for a reason. Because the framers understood, and modern governance has confirmed, that a president who is incapacitated or cognitively impaired is a genuine crisis for the country. The decisions that flow from the Oval Office affect military deployment, economic policy, international alliances, and the safety of millions of people. A president who cannot perform those functions at full capacity is not just a political problem, it's a constitutional one. So asking hard questions about presidential health is not an attack, it is a civic responsibility. The problem is when those hard questions get asked in bad faith for purely political reasons, without any genuine concern for the answer. It corrupts the entire conversation. And then, when there's a real question worth asking, when there's something that actually deserves scrutiny, nobody takes it seriously anymore because the topic has been so thoroughly weaponized. That's the cost, and it's a significant one. The issue of transparency around presidential health is not new, but it has become more urgent in recent years because of the advancing age of our political leaders. We have presidents and potential presidents who are older than any previous occupants of the office. That creates legitimate questions about stamina, cognitive function, and long-term health. And the public deserves answers to those questions. But the way the conversation currently works, the way it gets shaped by partisan interests on both sides, makes it almost impossible to have a productive discussion about it. Trump supporters see any question about his health as an attack. They see it as an attempt to undermine him through illegitimate means because they've been told that the establishment will do anything to remove him from power. And that makes them defensive, resistant to any information that might suggest vulnerability. His opponents, on the other hand, see every health report as a potential smoking gun. They're always looking for the hidden truth, the thing that the White House is trying to cover up. And that makes them see conspiracy in every routine update. Both perspectives are understandable given the context. Neither is particularly helpful for understanding what's actually going on. And the combination of the two creates a toxic environment where facts get lost and everyone retreats to their corners. The actual medical report, the actual test results, the actual findings from Walter Reed get buried under a mountain of interpretation and speculation. And by the time the dust settles, nobody can agree on what the report actually said. That's not good for democracy. That's not good for accountability. That's just noise. The Fox rumors are a perfect example of how this dynamic works. There was a real story here. The medical report was released. The findings were positive. There was a comprehensive workup at Walter Reed. Those are facts. But instead of just reporting those facts, people wanted more. They wanted drama. They wanted conflict. They wanted a narrative that confirmed their pre-existing beliefs about how the world works. And so a rumor started that someone at Fox had been punished for not towing the line. And that rumor spread like wildfire because it fit the story people wanted to believe. Now, does that mean there aren't legitimate criticisms of Fox's coverage of Trump? Absolutely not. There are plenty of legitimate criticisms. Fox has a documented history of aligning its coverage with Trump's interests in ways that go beyond normal editorial bias. That's real. That's worth discussing. But the specific claim that someone was fired for the medical report coverage is not supported by evidence. And when you repeat that claim as if it's fact, you're not just spreading misinformation. You're undermining the legitimate criticisms that actually exist. Because when Fox can point to claims that are false and say, see, the critics just make things up, it makes it harder to hold them accountable for the things they actually do wrong. The same dynamic applies to the broader question of Trump's health. There are legitimate questions to ask. There is a legitimate transparency issue to discuss. But when the conversation gets dominated by unfounded speculation and partisan attacks, those legitimate questions get lost. And nobody benefits from that except the people who want to avoid accountability. So where does this leave us? Trump got a medical checkup. The results came back positive. He went to Walter Reed for more comprehensive testing. Those results were also consistent with excellent health. That is what the verified reporting shows. The Fox rumors about firings connected to this specific story are not supported by the documented record. The age and fitness debate is real, legitimate, worth having, but only if everyone applies the same standard consistently. And the social media firestorm was entirely predictable, mostly disconnected from the actual facts, and driven by the same partisan engines that drive every Trump-related story into the stratosphere, regardless of what the underlying facts actually support. That's where we are. And honestly, the fact that a routine medical report can generate this much heat tells you everything you need to know about where the country is politically right now. Everything is a war. Everything is a signal. Everything is ammunition. And a presidential doctor saying someone is in excellent health somehow becomes the starting gun for another round of the same fight we've been having for years. The more the political temperature rises around this story, the less likely anyone is to actually hear the facts clearly because the noise is too loud. And the noise is loud by design. Keep people arguing about whether the medical report is real. Keep them distracted. And nobody has bandwidth to talk about the policy decisions coming out of the White House that actually affect their lives. It's a classic misdirection play, whether it's intentional or just a natural consequence of how the information ecosystem works. Trump's medical report should have been routine, but years of treating every health update as a crisis have created a cry wolf problem. The public's ability to distinguish real concerns from political noise has eroded, and that's a dangerous place to be when the president's health actually matters to everyone.